I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and welcome to ILTV's Weekly Review. We know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. Sit tight because we're about to give you the scoop on everything you need to know about the last 7 days right here from Tel Aviv. Even though the trial and sentencing of Israeli soldier Elor Azaria has ended, it's clear that both legal issues and controversy will continue to swirl around the deeply dividing case for some time to come. A military court has sentenced Sergeant Elor Azaria to serve 18 months in prison after convicting him on manslaughter charges a month ago. He's been ordered to start serving that sentence on March 5th. The soldier shot and killed a Palestinian terrorist who was incapacitated while stabbing other Israeli troops in Hebron. Military judges overruled Azaria's justification the assailant still posed a danger and found him guilty of violating the Israeli army's code of ethics.
בית הדין העביר בהכרעת הדין וגם בגזר הדין שניתן היום מסר חשוב לכלל המפקדים והחיילים בצה"ל באשר לערכי צה"ל ולחשיבות השמירה על טוהר הנשק. ברור לנו שזה לא יום קל עבור הנאשם ובני משפחתו, אבל את הדין צריך לעשות והדין נעשה.
Judges gave Azaria less than the 20 years the offense permits due to his unblemished military record prior to the March 2016 shooting. Palestinian officials, however, call his victim Asharif an Arab martyr and say his extrajudicial death was deliberate. The fallen terrorist's family is denouncing the sentence as unjust.
الضباط الأعلى مرتبة منه لم يقدموا إلى هذه المحاكمة. في النتيجة تكون المحاكمة هي محاكمة مكتوبة من قبل الاحتلال الإسرائيلي كتمثيلية. أعد السيناريو والتأليف والإخراج الجانب الإسرائيلي. فما كعائلة ماذا توقعنا هذا الحكم البسيط ضد هذا الجندي.
Azaria's family is also lamenting the sentence because they don't think he should be in prison for neutralizing a terrorist who had only moments earlier tried to kill Israelis. That view is shared by nearly half of Israeli Jews who say any Palestinian attacker should be killed on the spot. While Azaria's little sister Eti wrote on Facebook that she's ashamed of her country for imposing the sentence, her parents showed greater signs of patriotism. The soldier's mother Oshra painted her nails with the national colors to spell out the words "Mother's Hero," while his father led about 100 supporters outside the courtroom in singing the national anthem. Defense attorneys are now vowing to overturn their client's entire conviction.
אנחנו מערערים משום שמבחינתנו ההרשעה בעבירת הריגה יותר חמורה מאשר כל עונש שלא קיבל או היה מקבל. משום שהרשעה בעבירת הריגה, כפי שציין עורך הדין שפטל, אינה תואמת את העובדות שהוצגו בפני בית הדין.
Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman is underscoring the mitigating circumstances that prompted Azaria's actions and appears to favor a presidential or military pardon. That view is shared by much of the public as well as right-wing lawmakers.
כל יום שאלאור עזריה יושב מאחורי סורג ובריח הוא פשוט כתם שחור ומכוער לצבא הגנה לישראל, כתם שחור ומכוער למערכת המשפט. עצוב לי מאוד שהשופטים היום לא פקחו את עיניהם, לא הסתכלו על התמונה כולה ולא הבינו שהם צריכים להקשיב גם לרחשי הלב, גם למציאות הקשה וההתמודדות היומיומית של מדינת ישראל שנמצאת במלחמה מול אויב אכזר.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hasn't given any official statements during his overseas tour, but immediately after the soldier's arrest expressed sympathy to the Azaria family during a telephone conversation. The Israeli Prime Minister is feeling triumphant since his successful first White House meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. In fact, he's even borrowing a phrase from the Republican leader to describe the summit, saying that a new day has dawned on Israeli-American relations. During his first briefing to the Israeli cabinet since returning to Jerusalem, the premier updated his ministers on all important talks in the Oval Office. Netanyahu says the two leaders reached consensus on a number of hot-button issues, including further Israeli settlement construction in the West Bank.
הסכמנו להקים צוותים כדי לשדרג את כל התחומים המרכזיים ביחסים בין ישראל לארצות הברית, בתחום של הביטחון, בתחום של המודיעין, בתחום של הסייבר, בתחום של הטכנולוגיה, בתחום של הכלכלה, בתחומים רבים אחרים. וכן הסכמנו להקים גם צוות במקום שעדיין לא הסכמנו אליו, לא הגענו אליו להסכמה, ואני מתכוון כמובן לנושא ההתיישבות ביהודה ושומרון. גם על כך אנחנו נדון.
At a joint news conference with Netanyahu in Washington, Trump publicly urged the Israeli leader to curb settlement construction. But the new president also backed away from a U.S. commitment to a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which has been the long-standing bedrock of Washington's Middle East policy. Far-right members of Netanyahu's coalition have been emboldened by Trump's suggestion that he's open to new ways to achieve peace, not necessarily entailing the creation of a Palestinian state that's been considered a benchmark of American policy for decades.
אני חייב לציין שבסיום המפגש עם הנשיא הוא לחץ את ידי והגדיר את היחסים בין ישראל לארצות הברית כיום חדש, a new day. ואני חייב להגיד לכם, יש פה יום חדש, הוא יום טוב.
More details are now emerging about the secret peace talks that Israel held exactly a year ago, including controversial reports that the Israeli Prime Minister offered to halt all building outside of the major settlement blocks in exchange for a treaty with the Palestinians. We all know by now, of course, that the secret summit failed to yield any breakthroughs, but there's already ramifications from continuing reports of exactly what was on the table. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's already confirmed his presence at the February 21, 2016 talks, which included Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Jordan's King Abdullah, and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. The negotiations were based on the two-state solution and Arab recognition of Israel as a Jewish state. Netanyahu also reportedly asked Washington to officially recognize the large settlement blocks as Israeli in exchange for his proposed freeze, and presented a 5-step plan for a wider regional peace initiative. Israeli lawmakers across the political spectrum are now criticizing the premier for withdrawing from the negotiations, which he's believed to have blamed on opposition from his right-wing government. Meanwhile, another new report causing backlash today includes allegations the premier may have to take back his pledge to build a new settlement in the West Bank to compensate residents of the illegal outpost of Amona after they were evicted earlier this month. The backtrack is apparently linked to the request from U.S. President Donald Trump that Israel hold back on settlement construction. Netanyahu said to have explained to his cabinet that in actual terms, there won't be a complete freeze, but more likely a slowdown in West Bank construction. The White House's shift away from demanding a two-state solution is garnering a great deal of support from right-wingers in the Jewish state. Yet it's also been drawing fire from Ramallah. Many of Israel's nationalist politicians, such as Deputy Foreign Minister Tzipi Hotovely, are embracing the change in tone from the White House. The Likud party says that after years of deadlock, Trump's statement that he isn't insisting on a two-state solution opens a wide range of opportunities to the entire region. Israeli residents of the Efrat settlement in the West Bank are also voicing their content over Trump's stance.
It's a good idea to start thinking beyond the two-state for two-people solution and find another sort of common way that we could find peace between the two people.
Well, I think Trump is a businessman, and what he presented to Bibi is either one of two options, either one state or two states. Anyway, as he said, Israel will have to pay something for it. And finally, if you ask me, there would be a Palestinian state and an Israeli state.
Israeli opposition lawmaker and former Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni is taking a more cautious approach.
Thinking outside of the box is good. And as President Trump said, it's decision of both sides, Israel and the Palestinians. I do believe that two states for two peoples is the right solution because it gives an answer to the national aspiration of two different peoples.
The Palestinian Authority, however, is responding with alarm. PA President Mahmoud Abbas has reiterated his commitment to a two-state solution and continues to demand a halt to all Israeli settlement expansion. And here's what Chief Palestinian negotiator Saeb Erekat had to say.
So undermining the two-state solution will spell disaster on Palestinians and Israelis, and that's the truth. We're talking about peace in the region. We're talking about defeating extremists and terrorism in the region. And you cannot do that by merely waging wars. We need to get our act together. We need to have peace between Palestinians and Israelis. Now, as Palestinians, our option is international legality, is international law, is to live and let live, is to have the state of Palestine live side by side with the state of Israel in peace and security. on the 1967 lines.
Meanwhile, in the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip, Palestinians are expressing resignation and pessimism over the reaching of a peace accord with Israel anytime soon.
لكن أنا بعتقد إنه في الواقع لم يغير أي شيء. اللقاء هو نفس حديثه عن المستوطنات، حديثه عن الدولتين، دولتين، حتى صرح وقال لك أنا مش خلاف عندي لا دولة ولا دولتين، المهم يتفاهموا الطرفين، وهذا يعني بعتقد إنه لغى الحل السلمي النهائي في الضفة وغزة.
راح رئيس واجى رئيس، يعني يجي أحسن منه؟ والله ما ظنيت. شعبنا هو الغلبان.
U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to move away from the U.S.'s historical unwavering support of a two-state solution has stunned much of the international community, which has long crafted its diplomacy based on the premise of a future Palestinian state. Yet America's ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, is doing what she can to calm the shock by insisting that Washington remains committed to the two-state solution. The U.S. diplomat is nevertheless being careful to echo the president's statements that while he's open to finding new ways to achieve peace between Israel and the Palestinians, a peace deal is not for Washington to impose, but can only come from the parties themselves.
Well, I think, first of all, two-state solution is what we support. Anybody that wants to say the United States doesn't support two-state solution, that would be an error. We absolutely support a two-state solution. But we are thinking out of the box as well, which is, what does it take to bring these two sides to the table? What do we need to have them agree on? At the end of the day, the solution to what will bring peace in the Middle East is going to come from the Israelis and the Palestinian Authority. The United States is just there to support the process.
Haley then blasted the General Assembly and the Security Council for being focused on criticizing Israel, while stressing the Jewish state is the one true democracy in the Middle East. The ambassador says the U.S. will never let another anti-settlement resolution like 2331 pass, as the Obama administration did in December, which condemned settlement building. Haley went on to underscore Washington's determination to fight anti-Israel bias at the UN. The President of the United States may not have stated a firm commitment to a two-state solution, but the leaders of Egypt and Jordan are saying that when it comes to solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a two-state solution is non-negotiable. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and King Abdullah II have just joined for a meeting in Cairo to discuss ways to move forward with the Middle East peace conflict. Egypt and Jordan have already signed peace treaties with Israel, and both countries remain committed to a future Palestinian nation being created alongside the Jewish state. U.S. President Donald Trump recently stated that he will not be insisting on the implementation of a two-state solution and will, quote, be happy with whatever solution the Israelis and Palestinians decide together. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has not explicitly renounced his own commitment to a two-state solution, but he did choose to avoid Palestinian statehood during a joint press conference with the American leader. That very conference made waves throughout the international community, and the UN, EU, Arab League, along with many other nations, are strongly restating their support for a two-state solution as a result. On Monday, the Israeli Regional Cooperation Minister claimed that Netanyahu is in fact still committed to a future Palestinian state, but on Sunday the Haaretz newspaper reported that the Israeli leader had in fact rejected a peace proposal back in 2016. That plan detailing a two-state solution was put together in a secret meeting between Netanyahu, former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, the Egyptian president, and the Jordanian king. The Islamic State has now officially claimed responsibility for a rocket attack on Israel that took place just yesterday. On Monday morning, 2 missiles were fired into an open field in southern Israel, but luckily they didn't cause any damage or injuries. The rockets were fired not very long after the jihadist group had accused Israel of killing 5 of its operatives in an airstrike over the weekend. The reported drone strike came just a day after the Islamic State fired 4 rockets into the Israeli resort city of Eilat. The terror organization has now posted photos on Twitter showing their jihadists preparing the most recent missiles for launch, claiming they fired the 2 rockets at, quote, southern Palestine in an online statement. The Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman has already dismissed the threat posed by the jihadist group, claiming that while the Islamic State is, quote, annoying, the group doesn't really have the means to pose a serious threat to the security of Israel. The jihadist group has been mainly focused focused on waging a war against the Egyptian army in the Sinai Peninsula, but has long used small-scale attacks against Israel to show off its credentials. Despite the most recent round of rocket attacks on Israel fired by the Sinai province group, Israel's defense minister Avigdor Lieberman is dismissing the notion that the Islamic State-linked terrorists pose any significant threats to the security of the state. Lieberman says that while the jihadis in the Sinai are annoying and hindersome, they pose a minor threat when compared with Hezbollah on Israel's northern border and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. In fact, he even said that they're basically just, quote, random amateurs who decided to declare that they're an army. The Israeli defense chief's comments come in the wake of yesterday's rocket attack from the Sinai, in which 2 missiles fired from the peninsula landed in open Israeli territory. Luckily, the strike failed to cause any injury or damage to Israel. While no one has claimed responsibility for the attack yet, the attack does come just after the group accused Israel of killing several of its operatives in an airstrike on Saturday. Lieberman has failed to directly respond to those allegations, although he is stressing that Israel never lets any incident pass without a response. Some military strategists believe that new and more aggressive leaders of the terror group are now trying to create a balance of deterrence aimed at punishing Israel for its close security coordination with Egypt. The insurgents have been engaged in a bloody struggle for power in the peninsula for many years.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is continuing his meetings with leaders in Australia today in talks primarily focused on bolstering bilateral trade. The Israeli premier and his Australian counterpart Malcolm Turnbull have so far witnessed the signing of several agreements, including a memorandum of understanding between Qantas Airways and the Jewish state's national El Al carrier. During a ministerial-level meeting, Turnbull outlined commonalities between the two nations and called for an even further strengthening of ties.
Nonetheless, we need to do more together. There is so much scope for cooperation. We have the same values, democracy, freedom, and the rule of law. We're combating the same enemies, terrorism, terrorists that seek to subvert those values and deny us our ability to live in a free society. And we are both committed to the innovation, which we know will drive the productivity, as you said yesterday, to take us out, to keep rising in aspiration, in achievement, in prosperity.
Netanyahu also called for greater interaction between Israel and the Commonwealth in spite of the 7,500-mile distance between them.
And I want to start with something very simple and narrow. Not only technologies, not only cyber cooperation, not only R&D, but actually trade. Our trade is $1 billion. It should be at least double or triple that. And I'd like to encourage Australian and Israeli companies to increase the trade. And if I did the schlep, they should do it too.
Netanyahu is the first Israeli prime minister in history to make the schlep, which is an affectionate Yiddish word meaning a kind of difficult journey, to visit Australia. In the wake of the latest round of bomb threats targeting Jewish community centers and organizations, the United States Congress has come together across party lines to demand action in the form of a swift and thorough investigation. In response to the latest wave of bomb threats leveled against Jewish community centers and institutions around the country, over 150 congressmen and women signed a letter calling for a sense of urgency in investigating the matter. The letter demands that the United States Department of Homeland Security, the Attorney General, and the FBI look into the matter immediately and in cooperation with JCC associations and local forces to put an end to the growing trend. Since the start of 2017, 69 bomb threats have been levied against 54 different North American JCCs. 11 of these threats were just earlier this week on Monday. Earlier this morning, the Anti-Defamation League headquarters in New York was targeted. As in the cases with the JCCs, the threat was a hoax, and rather than intimidating, the newest bomb threat has only galvanized their cause. ADL CEO Jonathan Greenblatt said, quote, "This is not the first time that the ADL has been targeted, and it will not deter us in our efforts to combat anti-Semitism and hate against people of all races and religions."
Late Israeli President Shimon Peres passed away in September of 2016, but his legacy lives on through the many good works of the Peace Center he founded in his name. Our next story is about 16 deaf Palestinian children from the West Bank and the Gaza Strip who can now hear for the very first time, all thanks to a project sponsored by the center. All of the Palestinian children have been given cochlear implants during surgery performed at a Jerusalem hospital. The operations to repair the children's hearing have all been carried out over the past few months, including 6 during the past couple of days, all courtesy of the Jewish state. Israel's defense ministry has even played a part by authorizing travel permits for the children to be brought in for treatment from the Palestinian territories, including Gaza, run by radical Islamist Hamas leaders. Dr. Michal Kaufman performed all of the restorative surgeries. She told the Ynet news service that her young patients were completely incapable of communicating before the procedures, and expressed joy that Israel's been able to contribute to such a dramatic change for them. She says the Paris Center for Peace program is amazing for helping the children to step out of their world of silence to live fully normal lives in the future. We all remember staring out the window during long family road trips. I know that when I was a kid, I used to wait for the windows to get all foggy so I could paint pictures on them with my fingers. Well, my childhood activity might now be a thing of the past because an Israeli startup is introducing interactive smart windows to the world. Mercedes-Benz cars will soon feature the incredible technology in partnership with the Israeli company called Gauzy. Gauzy's developed a new way to share location and time-based messages on car windows by using their unique quid crystal glass panels, or smart glass. The patented technology reinvents glass by allowing users to control its transparency with their hands. The company's marketing director, Brittany Suissa, even says the new technology will allow parked cars to project location-based ads, similar to how posters are displayed on buses. If you're worried the images could interfere with your driving, Gauzy has your back. When the engine of your car starts, the windows become transparent in order to enable safe driving. The technology was first unveiled last week at the Autobahn Expo Day in Stuttgart, Germany. The expo showcases nearly a dozen startups for over 1,200 people. There's some big news among archaeologists today because yet another Hebrew inscription has been discovered during routine conservation efforts on an ancient synagogue in northern Israel. The inscription, which dates from the Roman period, was discovered on a limestone that lay overturned in the courtyard of the synagogue in Pekin. Pekin has a 2,000-year history of Jewish habitation, but today only one Jewish family remains in the predominantly Arab village. The matriarch of that family, Margalit Zinati, lives next door to the synagogue and has gone to great lengths to preserve the history of Jews in Pekin. Commenting on the find, Zev Elkin, the Minister of Jerusalem Affairs and Heritage, said that, quote, Pekin is one of the most significant sites in the Galilee and is a place where there has always been a Jewish presence. That's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next Friday for our next episode of Weekly Review. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv.